Welcome to another episode of Exploring Possibilities on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, my website, journeyofpossibilities.com, and now my YouTube channel, YouTube/Cheryl Sitz. I am Cheryl Sitz, your host, where every week we have some of the most interesting, inspiring conversations on the planet. It's our mission to explore holistic spiritual ways to transform life from the inside out. Do you like what you hear each week? Well, please help support this work and help us cover our costs for bringing this to you at journeyofpossibilities.com/support. This show and website are the skillful creations of tech shaman Mario Rosales of Tech Life Balance. Mario, how can you help our listeners this week?
Thank you, Cheryl. I actually want to say, first off, I don't speak geek. I speak English, Lightworker, Galactic, Spanish, or you name it. I can probably work it or figure it out, even sign language maybe. Anyway, the truth of the matter is I can make it understandable for you. Technology seems to be very complicated for a lot of people, and I've been in it for a long time, and I can make it understandable. I don't try to sell you stuff that you don't need, because that's not me. What I am the type of person that can give you the truth. The things that you don't need, we can say, no, we don't need that. Or I even have a listener one time that called me, and we agreed that she wasn't ready for my services. So what can I help you with? I can help you with websites, blogs, video, podcasts, social media. And yeah, even that weird stuff, go ahead and give me a call and we can figure it out. Contact me at marrosales.net, and I look forward to talking to you.
Who are you? Why are you here? What wonders and opportunities await you beyond physical death? What happened millennia ago to create the damaged earth and fractured societies you see around you? Empowering, enlightening, internationally acclaimed, the Joseph Communications books offer answers to these questions. Spiritual, concise, contemporary, non-denominational, the communications originate from Joseph, a highly evolved discarnate spirit concerned for you and the future of the planet and its peoples. The words of Joseph and his soul group give you the power to bring light and change into your own life and the lives of others, and to restore the earth. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats, the communications can be ordered today at www.thejosephcommunications.com, and also from Amazon and other major booksellers. All proceeds are used for further publishing and advertising, and to make the communications available worldwide.
We're getting excited about our amazing Create Your Own Peruvian Shamanic Experience next fall. We'd love to have you join us. All the details for this trip can be found at journeyofpossibilities.com/events. Today's guest is Linda Star Wolf. She has been a visionary teacher and shamanic guide for thousands in the past 35 years, has written several books, 3 of which we're going to discuss today. She has created a shamanic breathwork process, founded the nonprofit Venus Rising Association, and founded and presides over Venus Rising University for Shamanic Psychospiritual Studies. She is also co-founder of Shamanic Mystery Tours, where she takes spiritual seekers from around the world to explore sacred shamanic sites. So many great things we can discuss today. Her website is shamanicbreathwork.org. Welcome, Star Wolf.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you
Great
so
to
much.
be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you on the show. I'm excited. There's so many things we could talk about. How about if we start by introducing you a little bit to those who may not be as familiar with your work? What did your shamanic awakening look like all those years ago?
Well, Cheryl, I always laugh when somebody asks me this question. I get a big grin on my face because I think, oh, you're talking about the day I was born.
Yes.
I think the 2 most shamanic events that we ever experience, and that we're all meant to experience, is being born, and then when it's our time to leave the planet. This is a death and rebirth planet, and what it means is a planet full of transformation and change. And the biggest transformation I think of my life was the day I was born, and came from being in a spirit only, and came into being an embodied spirit. And I had a rather traumatic birth. I've written about it extensively. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but I almost died at birth. So I had kind of a double whammy, if you will, the death to the spirit, being in spirit only, and coming into form, which is a form of death and rebirth, and then a near-death experience at birth. But along the way, probably like many of us, Cheryl, I had what I would call my own initiations. That's what I begin to understand them as now, shamanic initiations of death and rebirth and things that, from childhood and adolescence and on and on. I didn't know that that's what they were, like most of us, they were problems
Right.
instead of seen as initiations. But now, with a little experience and wisdom behind me, I can see that they were all powerful shamanic initiations on my journey and that we all go through them. But I guess to truly answer the question in the way I think that you meant it is, the moment of true awakening. Quite frankly, my true awakening was after I had a near-death experience when I was a young hippie and, quite frankly, overdosed on drugs. And I was in my teen years, and I ended up in an emergency room and dying. And then I didn't know that I was dead because I was on the ceiling looking back at myself. And I woke up a few days later. And I remember, though, before I went unconscious, looking back and thinking, I don't understand what the problem is. I'm just fine. That was a real awakening. Many of us during that time were experimenting with hallucinogens and lots of things to, quote, expand our consciousness. And, and not really having a guide or a shaman to teach us how to do that, or a healer. And so we were just kind of, the experiment, I guess you would say.
Right.
And I refer to us as baby boomers to shamans, so the baby boomer didn't even know that's what she was doing. But I came back from that, and when I came back, I've never done drugs since then. But I came back with an understanding that everything that I was, trying to experience in some way, there was an awareness at that moment of this greater reality, and that I wasn't just my body. However, if I wanted to have a human experience, I was going to need to take better care of this body. And that was a very big awakening. There was many awakenings after that I, that were very big for me. I tend to have lived what I would call a shamanic life of initiations, like many people. But the next big one, which was the one where I walked through the door and didn't turn around ever again, was in my 30s when I met grandmother Twyla Nitch of the Seneca Nation, who's the Wolf Clan, I still say is, even though she's been gone since, from this planet since 2007. She passed at 94 years young. And she was an elder that appeared to me in a vision and dream and called me to her. And when I found her many years ago and met her, she was exactly as I had envisioned her. And she even told me where she had given me the spirit name that she gave me in the vision. And I knew at that moment, once again, that who we are is much bigger than just our bodies or just our spirits or just our experiences, that there's a whole other reality that we move in and out of all the time. Sometimes we're not aware of it. And then other times we become acutely aware of it through, sometimes a cataclysmic experience, and sometimes just meeting a person like Grandmother Twyla, who was probably the most powerful woman that I've ever met, ever in my journeys, and shaman.
And she let you know that this is a path for you, or somehow working with her, you realize this is your path to do this work?
Yes, she did. She was quite famous, actually, for calling people to her. She was a dream walker. She told me that I'm a dream walker, too, because I've frequently asked people, like, if they dreamed about me. Or people just told me they dreamed about me. So she was a dream walker, and her spirit would be called to people, and she would reach out to them, even though she'd never met them. And she said, it's not something that I consciously do. It's just something that happens in the dream time. And that had happened in a vision for me, and her calling to me and giving my name of Star Wolf. In fact, she called me Gentle Star Wolf. She said that was my full name. And it was several years. You see, this was before cell phones, Google, computers. It was several years before I could actually find her. I didn't know she existed in this dimension or not. Today you could Google it and find it, and you could Google the shamans in Peru, and then you could find the shamans there. There was me just putting my nose to the grindstone, really, and sniffing her out. and through a whole series of synchronicities. And I've written about it in several of my books. It was featured in one of Itzhak Berry, who's written about shamanism. I was one of the people he featured in that book about the meeting with Grandmother Twyla. But when I met her, she said, I gave you a name. What was it? And I told her. And then she said, and I gave it to you in the underground kiva where you sat at my knee, which was exactly the experience. And she said, now come in and let's get started. So from there, she really instructed me into the greater world of shamanism, if you will. And I've had the opportunity to study and to meet and be with many shamanic teachers. But she was really like a grandmother to me, and I was her adopted granddaughter. So I still am, because she's still very vibrant and very talkative from the other side.
What a fabulous blessing to have that happen for you. And
yes,
you are wide open to the spirit world. The first book that I wanted to talk with you about, I really enjoyed, 30 Shamanic Questions for Humanity. And that one is just I would consider this a handbook for anybody that wants to begin an experience of self-expansion, self-awareness, self-awakening. There's some great fundamental questions in here that they can start to really delve into the truth of who they are. What inspired this book for you?
What inspired this book for me was my deep love for a dear, dear student who had become a dear, dear friend of mine many years ago. And now she's one of the main core teachers on my staff at Venus Rising. And her name's in the book, so she won't mind me saying this. But Kathy Morrison, dear friend and sister, had struggled with suicidal intention or ideation and even attempts, and lots of medications and things throughout the years. And when she started doing shamanic breathwork with me about more than 25 years ago, she started getting better. And she started coming off all those things, which she's completely off of now, and is an amazing teacher herself for other people. In fact, you might want to interview her sometime. But anyway, Kathy was hitting a very difficult place where she was getting ready to completely change her life. And she was feeling some feelings come up again around this feeling of wanting to die. And part of what I knew as a shamanic teacher is that anytime we're making a big change, there is a part of us that's dying. And that can be translated into our consciousness when we feel stuck, that it means that we can't stand it anymore, that we just need to die. And so I was sitting and praying and meditating about it. And I really reached out to my spirit guides and helpers and went on an inner journey. And I heard this voice in my head, which is not an unusual thing for me, that simply said to me, 30 Shamanic Questions for Humanity. And my eyes kind of popped open and I thought, well, what is that? And then I heard this, sit down at the computer and just start writing. So I did. I sat down and I started writing 30 Shamanic Questions for Humanity, moving from ego agenda to soul purpose. And within about less than an hour, I had almost all the questions written. And I remember I had to take a break because I was doing a session with someone. And I thought, oh, I'm only at 26 or something. What if the rest don't come? And I went and sat back down and just immediately they popped out. And then I said to Kathy, I said, I don't know if you're interested in this or not, but if you would like to answer these questions, I think that they might help. And, what she has said since then is that from that day forth, suicide or the thought of suicide has never been an option for her again. And things changed radically for her. It moved her from that ego struggle to her soul's purpose. And she's been on staff with us ever since then. And she herself, we have a program called Transformation House, Cheryl, that here where I live in the mountains of Western North Carolina, we have a retreat here, my Loveland retreat, which is part of Venus Rising. And we have a place where people can come who are in a spiritual crisis, such as Kathy was, and who can come and stay for, a week or two or even longer. And we'll put together a team for that person to work with them. And so Kathy's one of the main people. I just love this. She's one of the main people on that team. And she takes people while they're here through the 30 questions.
Wow. And she has such firsthand insight into how transformational they are and where these people may be at when they're coming in. What a beautiful way for that connection to come full circle.
She's a living proof that it worked. And, this little book, for years, we just self-published it, and we just used it with our students and our workshops. And then people started asking to buy it. It was kind of like paperclip together, and and then we started hearing people say that they have reached Africa and all over Europe, and I was like, oh my goodness, and so we finally just put it on Amazon because we couldn't keep up with it, plus it costs more to mail it, to China,
Right.
so we just put it on, Amazon, where people can get it on Kindle, or they can order it in paperback now and go straight there and do that. But it's really selling, and it's been going on for more than 10 years, I think now. So that's great.
That is great. Well, for me too, the shamanic path has been one of moving from a perception of my life as being a victim of these things that happen to me to the way you call it, the shamanic initiation. So I want to read something out of here that I highlighted when I was going through all the way back at question 2. You say, you will discover that many of the hurt and wounded parts of you have also been highly creative adaptations that your inner child's ego created along the way in order to manage his or her fears, confusions, anxiety, and anger. I just thought that was a beautiful summation of the shamanic journey from what Eckhart Tolle calls our pain body to actually living an empowered life and seeing the beauty in the pain and those moments.
Absolutely. And it's important, especially right now during the Me Too movement, and when so many people are coming forth with victimization, not to discredit human suffering and the abuse that has happened for millennia on this planet, and that's coming out of the shadows into the light right now. We never want to ever make a victim feel re-victimized. And at the same time, one of the things I learned along the way, my earliest background after coming out of the 60s is I went right into becoming a social worker and a counselor and a therapist, and working with addictions and the inner child movement and abuse and all those kinds of things. So I've been doing this for a very long time, for many decades. And I even needed to make a shift, even with all of that in the beginning, because I only could see people as victims. And, when therapists do that, then they hold people in that victim place out of misguided codependency and caretaking. And so, there's nothing worse than a codependent therapist keeping, a client stuck.
Right.
And they don't mean to. Even the codependent therapist is innocent in a way.
Yes.
But once we wake up to our own codependence and say, okay, we're not going to justify things. We're not going to say that these aren't horrible things that happened, or that it's not true that a person's suffering. Not at all. But we are going to look at it and say, don't we find it interesting how some things tend to follow people and not make people feel ashamed or guilty that it's their fault that this thing has happened 5 times or 6 times or whatever, in that way. But there's no coincidence when somebody is married 5 times and they all 5 times is to an alcoholic.
Right.
There's no coincidence to, multiple illnesses occurring with someone. We all have illnesses, but you just have to stop at some point and say, why me? Am I really a victim? What we're really a victim frequently, as you just mentioned, is to the pain body that was created from the early events in all the way back in the womb to possibly the traumatic birth like I had, to childhood. And for those of us who believe in such things, and what I would call our past lives, or more appropriately, the way to reference them, since there is no such thing as time, our parallel lives.
Yes.
That are happening, and that those multitude of experiences can create energetic, like receptors to certain types of pain that actually draws them in. So when we develop a shamanic consciousness around this, we can still say, hey, this still hurts. This still is happening. Now, is there anything that I can do at a shamanic, psycho-spiritual level to break this pattern and to transform it into something else?
You just summed that up so perfectly. I can't imagine a better way to sum up the benefit to someone if they're asking, is 30 shamanic questions for me? How could this benefit me? If you feel like you're stuck in something, or something keeps recurring in your life and you feel trapped, or you just want to find your power in whatever's happening to you, I think this is a great way to reframe what's happening, see it differently, see yourself differently, and move through that one question at a time. I also got to mention, because I do have some personal experience in my past with the 12-step program, there seems to be a neat parallel between the kinds of questions that the 12-step program moves an individual through and the kinds of questions that were asked in here. Has anyone said that to you before?
Yes, Cheryl, absolutely. I myself, after coming through my own experience with addiction, entered into 12-step program 36 years ago. And that program was extremely beneficial to me for several years. And the steps are still it's kind of like I grew up with the 10 Commandments as a child, and I'll always know what they were. And they always, at a different level than they affected me then, they guided me then. But now I have a deeper, more esoteric understanding of the 10 Commandments, and also, of the fourfold path that I followed with Buddhism, or all those kinds of things. And the 12 steps definitely impacted my life greatly. And, so the point that I would say that I've maintained my own personal sobriety for 36 years, one day at a time. So those 12 steps are definitely a part of the influence with recovery from any situation. It's just that my language has changed somewhat to be more inclusive for everyone, and for those people who can't relate to addiction, although it's hard for me to believe that people can't relate to addiction in our culture of some kind, whether it's Netflix or which I love certain things on there. I'm currently addicted to Outlander. But anyway, the language of addiction is really the language of ecstasy, really, of seeking to feel high, to be expanded, to feel connected to something. And I call it that addiction really is an honest mistake, and that frequently it's a part of the shamanic path to a death and re-death experience. Unfortunately, some individuals don't find their way into a recovery, or what I call a soul return experience, and do, take the path of addiction till it takes them off the planet.
Right.
So I really feel that the more people can become involved with soulful recovery and discovery and find a language that fits, their story, the better that can be for, I think we need everybody here right now waking up to do the best we can.
Amen to that. I totally agree. So to kind of clarify what I was saying too, I believe that the 30 shamanic questions are a really interesting experience to move through, whether or not you've ever done the 12 steps, because it's the same kind of deep self-exploration, but with a very spiritual, it's a very holistic approach. It's not focusing as much just on the human experience and addiction's role in it, or codependency's role in it, but it's more about the totality of the experience, the mind, body, soul experience. So I just thought I'd put that out there as just my takeaway from it, having read it. And it's a great book, 30 Shamanic Questions. So I definitely recommend that. And you've co-authored some other books that I thought we might touch on while we talk today as well. Did you want to say anything else about that book before we move to the next one?
No, that I just feel like it was a real gift from, some unseen hand. And it certainly, I've worked the questions myself, and I've been amazed at oh, these are wonderful questions. I wonder who wrote them, sort of thing, because it wasn't me, I was the instrument, but I'm very happy to know that, that my love for my friend, opens a channel for something to come through that loved us both, and that has helped so many other people. So I'm grateful for that.
Yes, and so are we. And you bring a beautiful point. The things that we think are inspired by, or the things that may to us be inspired by a person, can move into realms of helping so many people. That's part of the walk that I have in this lifetime, is to share my healing experience, all aspects of it, so that others can see possibilities for themselves. And that's what you're describing here, is what you wrote that could help one person can help so many, because so many of us are going through different aspects of the same kinds of experiences. It's about the oneness that we all share in humanity in this life.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And, you mentioned my other books, and every book that I have written or co-authored, which is up to 10 now, and I'm currently working on 2 more books, but all of them are geared to bringing something back to support humanity at this time. Because, humanity, we are the apex predators on the planet. And it doesn't sound very nice to say that. But it's true. The apex predator here in the Western world was the wolf, and in Africa was the lion, and they still are, but they're actually both, on moving towards extinct patterns, which is very sad. But human beings are also apex predators, and we are because of our brute force and also because of our weaponry and that sort of thing, the apex predators. And if we're going to be that powerful, then it's important that we take responsibility for our power and for how we walk upon this planet. And, how are we going to find a way to move into a place where we're concerned for not only human beings, but all beings, for all things, and to create balance upon this planet, first within ourselves and then out into the planet itself. There's no way that we're really going to be able to impact the world unless we are bringing forth the best that's within us. And so the writing of my books and the co-authoring of my books have all been geared towards asking and inviting humanity to wake up and to take responsible for how powerful we are, and to move into that power in a very conscious way.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because it isn't just waking up to our power, which is wonderful for some of us who felt like victims our whole lives. Waking up to our power is fabulous, but with that power comes great responsibility. And it is so important that we do it in ways that are in harmony with our planet and with one another. So I'm so glad that you touched on that. And I had so much fun connecting with Ruby Falconer. I interviewed her October 7th was that show. If you want to look for it, it's in the libraries. What a fabulous connection. I love astrology, and you two have done something really magical in this book. So if anyone listened to that interview, or if you haven't and are going to, Star Wolf channeled all of the deities from the Egyptian days, which I believe you call the Netters, or the Neeters, if I'm saying it right, and applied those to modern astrology. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Well, that was really incredible, but we do have to back up just a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's three in a series. The first book was Shamanic Mysteries of Egypt. The second book was the Anubis Oracle deck. And then the third was the Shamanic Egyptian Astrology. So briefly touching on the first two, I had a trip to Egypt, which really was a trip in that experience there. And as I said, I've been I clean from drugs and alcohol for 36 years, but I went into a powerful altered state on that trip, in that journey to Egypt. And I took that trip out there with Shamanic Journeys tours and with Nikki Scully, who's a good friend of mine. And Nikki Scully is really, to me, the most modern day authority on Egyptian lore and the Neteru and all of those sorts of things, and has taken people on over 60 journeys in her years. The first group she ever took out was the Grateful Dead in the 1980s, I believe it was, or 1970s.
Wow.
Because her husband was the road manager, and she took the group out there. It was huge, and did a concert at the pyramid. So anyway, a little bit of fun there around that. But she's just a wealth of information about Egypt. And I wanted to take a group there. So we put a group together of about 40 people, and we went to Egypt. And I had no thought of anything except just making a wonderful journey. But I went into a very deep and profound place where I started having this experience of being in touch with the netters. And when I got in touch with the netters, they started speaking to me and they started channeling. And the energy they channeled was so profound that it turned into the shamanic mysteries of Egypt, which it tells the whole story how that all happened. Then also after that, we decided to create a Anubis oracle deck, which Anubis is referred to as the great jackal of Egypt. But truthfully, the DNA now shows that the so-called jackals on the walls of Egypt hieroglyphics are really the wolves, because the ancient wolves of Africa and Egypt didn't have the kind of fur that wolves have now. And so that was a really interesting thing for Anubis to come through and tell me that before the scientists actually came out and said that they're not jackals, that they believe that they were the wolves, the ancient wolves of Egypt.
Wow.
And so, and Anubis came directly to me and spoke energetically as a guide for me. And there's a lot about that, so I'm not going to go into it. I could talk about him all day because he really is, being a part of the wolf pack, he's a very near and dear to my heart. And he shows up in so many people's breathworks who do breathwork with me, even before they know who he is or what he is. And so, but he came in and said, I want to, give you an oracle deck that will help people on their journeys. So at one point, and Nikki and I did that one together too. And then Ruby, who is my dear friend, business manager, and one of my all-time favorite astrologers, because she's been doing it, she said, I think 45 years. I said, yeah, since you were 3 years old, or something like that. We always laugh about that. But Ruby said to me, Star Wolf, I see that all those deities, they have a relationship and a co-relationship to the astrological symbols. And I said, absolutely, Ruby. I said, for instance, Isis is Venus, and I just started naming off the ones that I felt that, the connection to. And she said, yes. And this is that. And I said, well, let's just do a book on it. And we contacted my publisher and they said, yes, this is fantastic. We were wondering when you were going to do that. So it's really there's 3 books that kind of created its own mystery school. One, a whole set of rituals that you can go through to get to know the netters. And each one of them has a quality like compassion, or forgiveness, or transformation, like Sekhmet is powerful transformation. And then the Anubis Oracle deck is an oracle deck, which is part of a mystery school. And then the astrology is part of a mystery school. So all 3 of those really complete a mystery in and of itself.
You did a fabulous job of going over all that in a very short amount of time. I
covered 3 of them right there.
I wanted to touch on Anubis also, because how Anubis is correlated to Chiron, the wounded healer, and how it's written in that book about the wounded child, the abandonment and the wounded child. And that's absolutely been something that I took on in this lifetime to move through those things. And I love the way it's all pieced together. And for somebody that I can't say I'm an astrology expert. I probably know enough to be dangerous, but you guys do a great job of explaining it so that someone can actually benefit from reading about this and reading about the people that are closest to them in their life and seeing the patterns and seeing their own story unfold. There's a lot of insight in reading this book that's actually helped to empower me in my life. So I just wanted to commend you both on it. And I just love it. Do you get a lot of positive feedback from it? And you do classes too together, right, on this?
Yes. Now, as I said, I want to acknowledge Ruby as the expert with astrology. I love astrology. I've always had what I call an astrologer in my court, meaning that I've been leading workshops for a very, very long time. And when I created Venus Rising Association for Transformation close to 25 years ago, I had a dear astrologer friend, Daniel Jamario, who created shamanic astrology about 35 years ago. He created that. Daniel's amazing. And I would always have him come and sit in right at the beginning and say, here's the auspicious thing that's happening right at the time that this group is coming together. And that would always just blow my mind, because I never, ever would say, well, we're going to do this on this date. The only time I've ever said we're going to do this on this date is when I've decided to do something on a solstice or an equinox or a solar eclipse or something like that, or a lunar eclipse. But I've never, look to see what the stars were going to be. But every time we would do something, it would just blow my mind and it would be right to the topic. And I'm like, okay, so were they talking to me and saying, this is the time to work on the shadow, or this is the time for the inner beloved, or the time to call in this or that, because it would always just seem to be right on. And so that said to me, whoa, the work that we're doing is definitely being guided by the stars and by the planets and by the cosmic forces. So when Ruby came into my life, she came into my life about 19 years ago, and I met her and I found out she was an amazing astrologer. And we moved from San Francisco here to the mountains where we created a community and created a retreat center. And she says, I'm going with you. And she moved here too. And right from the beginning, I just started bringing her into the groups and having her tell us what was happening. And again, it was the same thing. It was like, oh my goodness, obviously we need to have an astrologer in our court every time. And so I've learned so much from her. And she teaches in almost every workshop here that I do here at the retreat center. I bring her in and she has a time to teach. And she also does something wonderful called night sky teachings. And the only other person I've ever experienced that with too, is I have to, hats off to Daniel again. He's a good friend of mine. He now lives in the Philippines. That both of them go outside and they don't just talk about the stars and things. They, have these like little laser pointers and they point to the star or to the constellation or to different stars you wouldn't even know about or think about and talk about their influence. And then Ruby does this beautiful thing where she takes us on star journeys where people connect with a particular star in the sky. And we lie out on our spirit temple that can hold about 50 people on the top of the mountain under the night sky. And we literally journey with that particular star and allow it to transmit its energy to us. So we've had some really over the top experiences doing that with here and other places too. We did it in South Africa. We did it in Egypt on the Nile in a sailboat. But even though those are all powerful, I think none of them have been more powerful than here in the mountains of Western North Carolina, which, by the way, happens to be one of the places that has the most UFO sightings in the entire world. I did not know that when I moved here, but I now know that.
I am not surprised at all because it's all connected, as you say over and over again. It's all connected. So of course you do.
So, is that why I moved here? I didn't know why I moved here.
I love it. And that, you bring up a good point. I have actually done journeys around the full moon, the new moon, but why not the other planets? They all have such a powerful impact on our lives, and bringing the energy of a planet through, especially around a theme that's going on in our lives, there could be some really amazing insights there. So that sounds like a great experience.
Mm-hmm. It's fun too.
Yes, absolutely.
It is fun. We're kids at heart, and when we're little kids, we look up at the stars and say, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star," or "I wish I may, I wish I might." How the wish I wish tonight, or when you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. I mean, and Pinocchio, and all those sort of things. We know that stars are magic. We know that we come from the stars. Cheryl, this is maybe off the subject a little bit. I want to just say this though, because it is one of my favorite topics, and that is that every indigenous culture that I have connected with, and whether it's been in Africa, whether it's been in Peru, and in Egypt, and throughout South America, here in the United States, Native Americans, every culture that I have connected with believes. They would not say believe; they would say no. Also, I was just happening to think also the Maori that we all come from the stars.
Yes,
every one of them have their star mythology. And myths are true. They come from truth. Every one of them has their mythology about coming from the stars. And I remember Grandmother Twyla saying to me, we are star beings that are now here on earth, and we are now clothed in skin. And the light that is, the star within us is still there. It's just clothed in skin. And sometimes it can't radiate out because of our dense energy and our fears. It's not that there's anything wrong with our emotions. We need to own our emotions and feel them and express them. But to just be stuck in an emotional trauma or drama all the time prevents our light from shining through, and that glow from shining through. And that we are star beings. When people say we're spiritual beings having a human experience, I sometimes go, well, we're star beings having a human experience.
Yes, we are.
and the light shines through us. And when we do shamanic breath work, I need to start taking pictures of people right before they breathe and immediately after. The glow on a person's skin and in their eyes and through their aura is so noticeably different. I think we should do scientific testing with it for those people who need scientific evidence of the change, because we are completely changed beings, and there is no doubt about it before and after.
Well, I interviewed Dr. Sam over there doing the Bosnian pyramid, and he's doing all these tests and things, and they found the sacred waters under there, and they take people in, and then they come out, and they actually do an aura scan on them, and you can see the difference. So, yeah, I agree with you. You ought to do the aura scans for the breath work, because you're right. We do look visibly different after we journey than before. Everything about our energy field shifts.
It's so interesting that you just brought that up, because a few years ago, I don't remember how many years ago it's been, when they first discovered those pyramids over there, because they contacted me and they were doing something there. I can't even remember what it was. And my technology was a lot less than it is now, but we still managed to tap in. And there were several of us all around the world. And I was invited to be one of those people to help call forth the energies and reactivate them for that pyramid during that time. And so I did, a ceremony at the same time. And it was live. I remember that around the world when that was happening. It was very powerful. And so that's interesting that you bring that up, because I really haven't thought about it since then.
Well done.
Need to be in my consciousness for something, for a reason.
Yeah, well done. They're doing great work over there, and they are having a lot of people come and visit. And, he's so different because he does open it up, and he says, come on, have an experience with me, dig a little with me, come go into the waters. So, yeah, that's fabulous that you did that. It's so neat how we crisscross all over the place.
I love it. The dots all connect. We really are all connected. When we wake up, once that really happens, we never really meet a stranger again. We may be a little strange, but we don't meet a stranger.
Yes.
Because we go, oh, hi, sister. Hi, brother. Okay.
Absolutely. You're so right. That's what I love about this show. I'm just re-meeting people that I already know from other lifetimes and seeing what you're up to these days. So it's a lot of fun. Well, I want to talk to you for a moment about the third book that I said we'd mention, The Sacred Messengers of Shamanic Africa. Carly Matamore is going to be on my show on April the 7th this coming spring. But if you want to give us just a little preview, it was you who connected me with her to interview her and read this book.
Yes.
Tell me a little about how you got involved over in Africa with the lion medicine and that energy.
Oh my goodness. What a powerful experience. I don't know how many powerful experiences one person can have, but, if I never had any more, and I'm not calling that in, but I have had my quota, and that is an all-time high experience. Egypt still ranks for me as probably the most powerful experience. And I just, last Christmas I was there, but I went to South Africa, to Timbavati, with Carly Matamore, who's a dear friend of mine. She was a student of mine for many years. And, most of my students have become my best friends, and I'm their student as well. That's why I love it. And we teach each other. And
yes,
I just wanted to encourage her, because she was so called to Africa. She lived there as a young woman, and she was going back to go be with Linda Tucker and the White Lion Trust, and to be with the White Lions there. And she invited me to go with her. And I think it was the second or third time she was going. And I did go, and I took a group of people and students and friends, and we went and stayed with Linda Tucker at the White Lion Trust, which they are charged with, have taken on the mantle of trying to protect the white lions in the wild there, because there's not that many of them left. And there's a whole beautiful story about that in The Sacred Messengers. And Carly and I decided to take all the material that she was writing and the channeled material that I was getting while I was there, from the baobab tree, which is 1,000 years old, to the hyenas that we were watching that were eating, the zebra after the lions had made their kill in the morning. We're out in a little Jeep out in the wild, and, we're with elephants, with tusks 15 feet long, giraffes, towering overhead. It's like when I was a little child and, watched the TV on Saturday morning and would see the animals running across the fields in this veldt of of Africa. I always longed to have that experience firsthand. So to have that experience firsthand on the planet at this time, especially when, these animals are, many of them, very endangered
Yes.
to losing them, which would be such a heartbreak. The rhinoceros, getting out and walking and seeing rhinoceros tracks,
Wow.
right where we're on the path that we're walking on, and really seeing all of these creatures and being with them so close, having so many profound downloads and connections, heart connections, and hearing their message, and understanding that we human beings, because of our weapons and things like that, that we are the apex predators, and we have the responsibility of keeping these creatures safe, of making sure that we're doing our part to keep their habitat safe and those sort of things. So it's a mixture of spiritual, shamanic, and ecological. And in the book we seek to bring that together, to bring that wisdom together, that these beings are powerful sentient beings, that they are elders. They are elders. They've been here much longer than us. And that, as Chief Seattle said, if we do not care for these elders, whether they're in four-legged or two-legged, or whether they're winged ones or ones that fly or swim, or the grandmother trees, the baobab trees, if we don't care for these things and tend to them and ensure their safety, then we ourselves are going to lose our own safety. We will lose the very earth and the creatures around us. And then the balance will be so imbalanced that none of us will be able to be here. So the Sacred Messengers is really about remembering that. It's a very powerful shamanic book, focused on where the other mysteries, some of the mysteries were focused on Native American, or focused on the Egyptian mysteries or Neteru. This is really focused on Africa, which is also really Egypt. Africa and Egypt are really just the upper and lower Egypt, but it's a whole different terrain and different creatures that inhabit there, and the different peoples there, and really pulling that wisdom in and knowing that we need to learn from this cradle of civilization, this place where most likely all of us, even if we came from the stars, which I believe we did, where we evolved from as human beings and where we stepped out into the rest of the world, that there's something incredibly magical about that. So I'm going to leave it to Carly to share with you her experiences. She's there right now. I just wrote her and said, when are you getting back? We're going to have a conversation in a few days. She just took a smaller group over there. They were just trekking with the elephants. They spent time with the white lions. I got to see a white lion who had 2 white baby cubs.
Wow.
So it's I'm definitely going to be going back again. It's just an amazing experience. And the book is very, very poignant for right now. It talks about Cecil the lion that was, I hate to just bring up a downer, but, that was killed by a poacher, from the United States, and about how these trophy hunting and camps, show they're just immoral. I can't say anything else. They're just immoral. And there's just no way that anybody, if their heart is open, can possibly believe that it's okay to pay $150,000 to go and shoot a lion in a canned camp. It's just immoral. So, but that it's happening also brings the shadow out for us to look at and to say, what has happened to the heart of humanity, and what are some of the things we can do to help people reconnect with their humanity?
Absolutely.
And I call it reconnecting with our humanity.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's why I'm so passionate about doing this show, because I believe when we know better, we'll do better, as Maya Angelou says. And so we're just trying to know better so we can do better. Again, so Carly's going to be on the show April the 7th to talk more about that book. And if all of this is sounding kind of familiar to you, we did recently interview Tamar Peters of the Sacred Wildlife Project, who learned how to channel messages from the animal kingdom with the white lion messages. So all of this is tied together too. And I have introduced Carly and Tamar, by the way, so that they could pursue their work. And since my interview with Tamar, she has moved to Africa to focus on this work there with the white lions. So I love how we're all coming together to return to these ancient places and bring forward the wisdom that we've moved too far away from, possibly, so that we can remember all of who we are and not just the parts that we're most familiar with, good or bad, as you might look at them, right?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And to me, the most important thing on this planet and my sacred purpose personally for myself and for, I believe, this lifetime, my contribution is to support individuals and groups in their awakening. For those who are seeking awakening, for those who might not even know that that's what they're seeking, to really put the information out there as much as possible. My focus or my tagline really this day and age is that it's time to awaken the shaman within all of us. And that's not to discredit the shamans that have been on the planet for a long time, such as in Peru. I just came back from an amazing trip with my dear sister, Vera Lopez, and we're writing a book on the shamanic mysteries of Peru right now. And she's been taking people there for 26 years. And this was my third trip over. And we're really close to the beautiful shamans or the Pacus shamans over there. And, they have been doing this for millennia. So we know that there's these individuals who have, who've held this lineage for such a long time. It's not a discredit to say to them, now we need to all awaken our shaman within, because quite frankly, that's what they're all saying. They're saying to us, we're your older brothers and sisters, and we've been holding the knowledge and the wisdom. And sometimes they've had to keep it secret for a long time because of genocide and because of religious persecution. But now they've come back out and they're willing to help us. And, I've been tied into many of these people now for close to 30 years. And Grandmother Twyla, when I said to her, is it okay that I'm doing shamanic work? I have blonde hair, blue eyes. And she laughed and she said, where are your people from? And I said, Scotland and Ireland, England. She said, yeah, you're Celtic. You're true. You have your own tribe. And she said, yes, it's time for us to become Aquarians. She was tuned into astrology. She said, it's time to be Aquarians. It's time to become Aquarian shamans and to remember that we all come from lost tribes. Every one of us is tribal. That's why we, create family and want to have communion and connection with one another. And so it's time for us to wake up and remember that we're all indigenous. And indigenous really means relating to the earth, coming from the earth, connecting to the earth. And there's not a one of us that doesn't drink water, eat food, breathe the air that's here, take in the sunshine that metabolized and, through the plants. And we're all earth creatures as well as star beings. So we are indigenous as well as star beings. We're indigenous beings. And it's important for us to remember our shamanic roots. So the piece that I wanted to say about that, Cheryl, is that in my dedication to awakening myself and supporting others to remember this shaman within and the wisdom within, I've used shamanic breathwork. And I did write my book on shamanic breathwork quite a few years ago. The shamanic breathwork is spreading around the world. I even heard that last year that they did shamanic breathwork at Burning Man.
Isn't that awesome?
So I'm, from it being kind of a weird thing that I did on the side with not much fanfare, with 5 or 6 people, to hundreds of people. I do it with Don Miguel Ruiz's group every year. Down out in Sedona, there's a group of about several hundred people that come together for something called Gathering of the Shamans, and the people that get to do shamanic breath work there. So it's a very safe tool for anyone. I even did breathe Grandmother Twyla, and she loved it. She's like, "Oh, I love this. This is such a great way for people to awaken." And remember who they are. And I've even done it with children. So the shamanic breath work is a very safe process for people to have an altered state without needing to ingest anything except the breath.
I'm afraid we're almost out of time. So I guess we've got time just to have a quick rundown of maybe the next couple of 3 events that you'd like to let listeners know about that you're doing.
Sure. I'm going to first say that people can go to shamanicbreathwork.org, and that's my website for Venus Rising Association for Transformation. On the website, they can see our team, they can see what we're doing, they can see a list of all the books and events and those kinds of things. There's an events page there. There's also where people can find out how to become a shamanic minister, shamanic breathwork facilitator, start their own congregation, or apply to our university for shamanic psychospiritual degree. The most important things I'd like to share as far as events coming up is that, and some of these are sold out, so I'm not going to announce them actually. I'm going to move over to next spring. So we have the Gathering of the Shamans with the Don Miguel Ruiz family and friends at the Mago Retreat Center, May 3rd through the 5th. And if people go to my Star Wolf Facebook page, you'll see things on there advertised and sharing the different things also that are coming up. That's May 3rd through the 5th. And there's several presenters there and it's really doing ceremonies. It's a beautiful time. And then for those who are really interested in training in shamanic breathwork and coming to be with me here in the mountains of Western North Carolina at my retreat, May 16th through the 29th is our 2-week intensive SHIP program, Shamanic Healing Initiatory Process, which is part of the training. And last but not least, we're taking a cruise, shamanic cruise, August 31st through September 9th, with a group of people. And we will be doing a variety of things, including breathing on that cruise and going out into different places in Alaska. So that's just 3 things that's happening next year. And there's about 30 events happening next year, but that's 3.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And you are doing amazing things all around the planet. I would like to wrap up by asking you if you have a parting thought that you'd like to leave the listener with today.
Trust your heart and let your inner wildness come out. Don't let people or other people, places, and things tame you too much. And what I really mean by that is everybody has such a beautiful, wild, unique, shamanic spirit that is good at its core. Trust that. Let your heart lead the way. Now more than ever, this planet and all beings are counting on us to wake up and remember who it is we really are. And that is that we are star beings becoming, hopefully, humane beings.
I love that. And spoken by a pure star wolf, right? That you would say, remember your wildness. I love it. It's been so much fun to connect with you today. You have a lot of wisdom to share. Thank you. I know you have a busy schedule. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. And I look forward to meeting you at one of your events soon.
Oh, Cheryl, it's been a delight. I can feel that we're definitely kindred spirits and sisters. And I really look forward to meeting you in person very soon.
Same here. And thank you for listening to the show today. What did you think? Let us know. We want to hear from you. We welcome your feedback. We welcome your support. journeyofpossibilities.com/support. And we'll be back next week with another show on exploring possibilities.